special guest this morning, the Deputy Environmental Law Center. I am Susan Chan. I am the program coordinator for these monthly programs, which is a very fun job because I get to talk to great women and have them come in and share their stories with us. So let me tell you a little bit about Stephanie. Stephanie is a staff attorney in the National Office of the Southern Environmental Law Center, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan legal advocacy organization rooted in and focused on the South. Stephanie's practice centers on water resource protection with a focus on restoring and preserving natural flows in the South's many rivers and streams. An East Tennessee native, you're from here. Stephanie is a graduate of Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and Vanderbilt Law School. Student as well, a graduate. Prior to working at SELC, Stephanie clerked for the Honorable Thomas A. Varian, did I say that right? And the Honorable Pamela L. Reeves, United States District Court judges for the Eastern District of Tennessee. Stephanie lives in East Nashville, where she can frequently be found walking the Shelby Bottoms Greenway or enjoying Middle Tennessee's other green spaces. So without further ado,
hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Biggs. It's great to be here today. I am a proud TWIG member, so I'm delighted to be able to talk to y'all. That was a great bio. So I don't know how much more I need to say about it, but yeah, born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. I came to Nashville several years ago to go to Vanderbilt Law School and had my interest in environmental law really solidified there. I had some amazing energy, environment, and land use professors at Vanderbilt. I think at least some of them are also TWIG members. And then left for a couple of years to clerk and to do environmental regulatory law at a large law firm in Washington, D.C. And then I came back to Nashville about 3 years ago to join SELC's Nashville office, where my practice is primarily centered on water. And I will just give a so got it. Just a brief overview about SELC. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit law firm. We have offices in 6 southeastern states and Washington, D.C. And we represent other nonprofits, community groups, and environmental justice groups to work to protect our natural resources in the Southeast and to ensure clean air and clean water for the communities that live here. And I've included both my contact information and our development officer's contact information, Dustin Williams. So if after the end of this you want to learn more about SELC, you can reach out to either one of us. So I want to talk about our water practice in SELC. And when doing environmental law and water law in Tennessee, there are these 2 large forces that really have informed our work for the past couple of years. And the first is the Southeast's incredible biodiversity, and in particular, our incredible aquatic biodiversity. You can see this map here on the left is fish diversity in the United States, and the Southeast in general, and Tennessee in particular, is the hotspot in our nation for fish diversity. If I were to change this map out to show salamander diversity or crayfish diversity, this would look very similar. The Southeast is the hotspot for aquatic biodiversity in our nation. Unfortunately, map on the right shows concentrations of imperiled biodiversity, and you can see that the Southeast is pretty bright red. So we have a lot of incredible species in the Southeast, and a lot is at risk. We have a lot to lose. The second factor that really has been informing our work recently is the incredible population growth that Tennessee is currently experiencing. This graph on the left shows kind of the cyclical ebb and flow of net in migration into Tennessee since the early 90s. And you can see that we have welcomed in more Tennesseans than have left every year since the early 90s. But there are kind of peaks and valleys in the number of new citizens that are coming in. And we have typically peaked out at around 50,000 net in migrants in any given year. And in 2021, we hit what would have historically potentially been a peak year. And instead of those numbers then trending back down, they just skyrocketed. And we are in the process of welcoming in more new Tennesseans every year than, if not ever before, then at least in the past several decades. And although this is not a story that is specific to Tennessee, it is a particularly Southern story. The states where SCLC operates are seeing an influx of new residents, unlike any other part of the nation. And so, you know, we are experiencing this demographic phenomenon, which is providing tremendous financial incentives to developers to build out our traditionally rural or undeveloped landscapes. And I want to be very clear right now that SCLC is not anti-growth. We recognize that growth is inevitable and can bring a lot of benefits, but we are very committed to the principle of smart growth, and that you know, as we build out our landscapes, there are really important conservation guardrails and laws that need to be in place to protect you know, the land that we call home and that we love. And so unfortunately, we are seeing a recurring pattern where there are some, not all, some developers who are really attacking the environmental guardrails and the conservation guardrails that we currently have in place. And so in our water work, we are having to step in and demand that those guardrails remain while we are experiencing such tremendous growth. So I'm going to talk to you about this in the context of a couple of issues that we've been working on recently. And the first one is protecting Tennessee wetlands, particularly after the Supreme Court's decision in Sackett versus EPA. Wetlands are incredibly important for water quality in general. They filter and trap sediment and pollutions before they could enter into our lakes, rivers, and streams. They provide life-saving functions by slowing down floodwaters when we experience very heavy bouts of rainfall. They recharge our aquifers in places like West Tennessee, where so many communities rely on the Memphis Sand Aquifer. They help replenish those aquifers, and they provide habitat for our wildlife, and Tennesseans benefit from that for our recreational uses of hiking and fishing and kayaking and all of the above. So wetlands are incredibly important. But last year, the Supreme Court issued a decision called Sackett versus EPA, where they dramatically narrowed the scope of federal clean water protections for our nation's waters and wetlands. And to talk about the real world implications of Sackett, I thought it might be interesting to kind of learn a little bit about this case. So this case really centered on waters around Priest Lake in Idaho. You can see Priest Lake is a stunning water body. It's often referred to as the crown jewel of the Idaho lake system. And the Sacketts are a couple who own a parcel of land about 300 feet off of the shores of Priest Lake. And you can see here, their land is denoted in red, but there's a road that kind of abuts the Sacketts property. And on the other side of that road is this large wetland area. The wetlands also extend onto the Sacketts land, and then right over here, that's also wetlands. And so these wetlands are connected via groundwater to Priest Lake. There's also an unnamed creek that kind of flows parallel to the road on the opposite side of the Sacketts land, and then crosses down into this forested area. And there are ephemeral streams on the Sacketts property that discharge into that unnamed creek that then discharges into Priest Lake. And so an ephemeral stream it's not flowing all the time, but during certain months of the year, you do have water flowing through certain channels into the lake, or into the creek, then into the lake. And the Sacketts began filling in their wetlands without a federal permit. And the EPA asserted jurisdiction over the Sacketts activities. And the Sacketts were represented by Pacific Legal Foundation, which is a conservative nonprofit legal foundation that is very focused on property rights. And this really became a case of private property rights versus clean water protections. And they fought that case all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the real issue there was what is considered a water of the United States, such that federal protections under the Clean Water Act would apply. And SCLC submitted an amicus brief in that case. Us in the NRDC represented 114 conservation and faith-based groups. And we really focused on two issues for the court to consider. The first was that the purpose of the Clean Water Act, this is written in the text itself, is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. And so, you know, the Sacketts had both the groundwater connection to Priest Lake via the wetlands and surface water connection via their ephemeral streams. And, you know, it is just science that what you do to water bodies that are hydrologically connected to larger water bodies will affect the health of those larger water bodies. So nobody was arguing that Priest Lake was not covered by the Clean Water Act. It was really the waterways and the wetlands on the Sackett's property. The second thing we pointed out was that in 1977, the Clean Water Act was specifically amended to specify that quote unquote adjacent wetlands fall under the Act's protections. And here it seems like, you know, you've got some wetlands that are just a couple hundred feet from a water body, and there is a clear hydrologic groundwater connection. Those are adjacent wetlands. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not agree. Justice Alito, writing for the majority, held that the Clean Water Act only covers wetlands that are, as a practical matter, indistinguishable from relatively permanent bodies of waters, whether that's an ocean, river, lake, or permanent stream. There were some really interesting concurrences in this opinion that really read like dissents. Justice Kavanaugh wrote a concurring opinion where he said that the court's ruling departs from the Act's text and will have significant repercussions for water quality and flood control throughout the United States. And he really took issue with this practical matter indistinguishable language. He was saying that, you know, the court is misunderstanding the word adjacent, and they are requiring adjoining. So if you think about, you know, houses in your subdivision, the house next to you is an adjacent house to you, even if there's a little bit of a strip of lawn between you all. An adjoining house is if you live in a townhome in Washington, D.C. and you share a wall with somebody. So he was saying that the court is basically requiring wetlands to adjoin waters of the United States, whereas, you know, Congress passed a statute specifically saying adjacent was the standard. Justice Kagan also concurred, and she said that the court substitutes its own ideas about policymaking for Congress's. The court will not allow the Clean Water Act to work as Congress intended. So this was last summer. And in the Southeast, the major impacts that the Sackett decision will have is on our wetlands. This is a map. Oh gosh, you can't read the top of it. Southern wetlands in the coastal plain that was put together by our GIS team. And the coastal plain includes parts of the Mississippi River watershed, which encompasses large swaths of Western Tennessee. So you can see that a lot of the South's wetlands are now no longer enjoy federal protection. And these are really important wetlands in our ecosystems. You know, wetlands in Tennessee, we've got the bottomland hardwood forests that are very common in West Tennessee, but we also have wetlands all throughout our state, and oftentimes they're pretty rare forms of wetlands. We've got highland bogs, wet meadows, upland fens. We've got some really cool wetlands on the Cumberland Plateau and in the Appalachian Mountains. And so according to the USGS, there are approximately 787,000 acres of wetlands in Tennessee. And after Sackett, 55% of our state's remaining wetlands lost federal protection. That is approximately 430,000 acres of wetlands in Tennessee that no longer enjoy federal protection. So that's really bad news. The good news is that they do enjoy protection under our state laws. We have a really great law called the Tennessee Water Quality Control Act that covers all wetlands in our states. So they do, all of our wetlands still enjoy state protection. However, there was a bill that was introduced in the Tennessee legislature this year, which attempted to roll back state protections of wetlands to the federal level. So we would have lost protection of 55% of our remaining wetlands, both at the state and the federal level. SCLC anticipated this, and we took action to protect our state water law. We helped form and lead a nonpartisan coalition of environmental groups and groups that are really concerned about flooding in our state to push back against this bad bill and to educate the senators and House representatives on the importance of wetlands to our way of life in Tennessee. And one of the issues that we really focused on was flooding. You know, as we are building out Tennessee at such an incredible pace and hardening our natural landscapes, we are seeing increases in flooding. This is a picture of Hillsborough Avenue in Franklin in 2021. You can see some pretty significant flooding, and this was taken only a couple of months before the deadly and tragic flooding that occurred in Waverly, Tennessee, where 20 Tennesseans lost their lives. So, you know, we're really trying to educate the legislature. 1 acre of wetland can hold over 1 million gallons of water. These are critical infrastructure systems to help us manage and mitigate flooding in our state. And so I'm really pleased to say that our efforts were successful. That bad bill did not pass, but it has been sent to what is known as summer study. And TWIG, our state environmental agency, is charged with gathering stakeholders to figure out a path forward on wetlands. And so SCLC is committed to participating in that summer study and continuing to advocate for the protection of our state wetlands. So, you know, the wetlands is an example of environmental guardrails and conservation guardrails really being challenged at the federal and state legislative level. But there have also been efforts to remove conservation guardrails at our state regulatory level. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 examples today. And one of them has to do with stormwater runoff rules that govern stormwater at new development sites in Tennessee. And this was a move by TWIG to weaken those stormwater rules. So stormwater is the 2nd largest source of water pollution in Tennessee after agriculture. And given the construction boom that we're currently experiencing, you know, that is likely to continue. And when developers build on sites, they have to do 2 things with respect to stormwater. The first is that they have to do some math. They have to figure out the quantity of stormwater that is going to come off of their site. And then they need to choose what are called stormwater control measures to put on their site to slow and trap and treat to a certain extent the stormwater on their site before it is discharged into our sewer systems. And stormwater control measures can be things like rain gardens, permeable pavement, retention ponds. And so what stormwater control measure developers choose and the size of that really depends on the quantity of stormwater that's coming off of their site. So 2 summers ago, TWIG issued new stormwater rules that were really going to impact this system. And the rules contained a really problematic loophole, which would allow quote unquote uncontaminated roof runoff from being exempt from stormwater rules. And so basically what that means is if stormwater coming from roofs was somehow deemed uncontaminated, developers could ignore that quantity of stormwater when designing and sizing and choosing their stormwater control measures, which would then be in place for, you know, decades on that site. So this was really problematic and concerning for 2 reasons. The first is that it is just a factual fallacy to say that stormwater coming off of roofs is somehow can be deemed perpetually uncontaminated. Roofs are a constant and consistent source of pollution for our waters. You know, birds sit on roofs and poop on them. You have cars and smokestacks that have exhaust that then settle onto roofs. Roofing materials themselves are often full of metals and plastics and oils that can degrade in our hot Tennessee summer sunlight and then will enter, you know, be picked up by stormwater and go into our sewers. And so it is just incorrect to pretend that runoff coming from roofs is uncontaminated. The second problem is that if developers were allowed to ignore the quantity of stormwater that comes off of roofs, they would then design and size their stormwater control measures so that they would be undersized and subject to overwhelm the first time that it rains. And when that happens, that will exacerbate urban flooding and it will allow more pollution to go into our lakes, rivers, and streams. So TWIG got a lot of pushback on this loophole. They received a lot of comments from water conservation groups, from MS4s, from municipalities, all really questioning this loophole. And unfortunately, the department not only included this in a rule, but then later also included this in a general permit, which governed developers' stormwater requirements. And so when that happened, SCLC stepped in. We represented the Harpeth Conservancy, which is a great nonprofit water group based in Middle Tennessee, and we challenged both the rule and the permit, and in particular challenged this loophole. And we entered into settlement negotiations with TWIG, and TWIG agreed to remove the loophole both from the permit and the rule. And that process has taken a while, but I'm really happy to report that as of this spring, that loophole is no longer included either in the rule or the permit. So that was a great win. Another issue that I've been working on recently has to do with TWIG rules governing wastewater treatment systems, and in particular, systems that are referred to as activated sludge package plants. Now, what are package plants? They are a type of mobile wastewater treatment system that can kind of be moved into a community and placed there. Waste enters into that system. There is a microbial community that feeds on that waste in the system, produces settleable sludge and dish effluent, which can then be discharged via pipe into your nearest stream or waterway. And a couple of months ago, I was doing kind of a routine review of proposed changes by TWIG to its rules and regulations when I noticed the following red line. And this is very wonky language, I apologize for it, but package plants in TWIG's rules are called small domestic wastewater plants. And what you see here is a proposal by the state to completely delete a portion of its rules that govern package plants. And these rules basically prevent the placement and use of package plants in Tennessee when they are below a certain size, so small package plants. And if they're a little bit bigger, they severely restrict their placement. And these rules were put into the books in the late 80s or early 90s. And the practical effect of these rules has been that no new package plants have come into Tennessee really since the late 80s or 90s. So TWIG was proposing to just do away with these rules. And I didn't totally understand what this meant or the water quality implications, but we spoke to some water partners across the state, and we quickly realized that this proposal was going to have really major implications for water quality in our state. So the problems with package plants are manifold. They are really difficult and finicky systems to operate. The entire purpose of operating a package plant is to keep that microbial community in a package plant alive and healthy so that it can continue to treat the waste. This is easier said than done. Those organisms need to be fed a really steady stream of waste. And so when package plants have been placed historically at schools, kids go home on the weekend or summer break when like very few people are in the school for several months, that can really upset the system such that it doesn't work well. Also, a common placement of package plants is that a developer will develop a subdivision, haul in a package plant, put it there, gift it to the HOA, and then walk away. And people pour all kinds of things down their drain. So say a homeowner pours a bottle of bleach down their drain. That toxic shock can kill off the entire microbial community, and these systems don't have any redundancy. So until that community can be revitalized, what you get is raw sewage being discharged into your local creek or stream. These systems are also really hard to operate. They are not like a plug in and walk away type system. And so, you know, unless your HOA president also happens to run your local wastewater treatment plant, they're going to have a really hard time operating these systems. And another thing that we were concerned about was that we thought that this would become an oversight nightmare for TWIG. You know, if we allow hundreds of these wastewater treatment systems that have very high failure rates to proliferate across our state, you know, TWIG is an agency that has a limited budget. They have limited inspectors. Their inspectors are already in charge of, you know, large amounts of permittees who are discharging into our waterways, and allowing in hundreds of new systems that are prone to failure, we felt was going to be really difficult for TWIG to be able to effectively have oversight for. So now that I have sufficiently scared you about package plants, this kind of begs the question of, why was TDEC proposing this rollback? And we learned that they were doing so on behalf of some members of the development community who want to use these systems in Tennessee. As they are expanding into more and more rural areas of Tennessee, maybe traditional sewer doesn't exist there, or it would be pretty expensive to bring it out, and they want to be able to use this as an option for wastewater treatment. But we were really concerned because it didn't seem like TDEC had really spoken to other interested stakeholders about this before they did this proposed rollback. They didn't speak to the water conservation groups, to municipalities that would ultimately be burdened by these systems, to the Tennessee Association of Utility Districts, which is the trade organization for utilities in our state. And so we really did that work. We made sure that everybody was aware of this proposed rule change and that they were aware of it in time to submit public comments. And ended up having a lot of these groups submit public comments, all really concerned about this proposed rollback and raising these issues and, letting their voices be heard, really. And I'm happy to report that TDEC has stepped back from its plan to roll back this rule. We're not certain that it's gone for good. It may come back in a different iteration, but at least now all of the interested parties are aware that this is being proposed, and we stand ready to step back in if and when a new iteration of this proposed rule change comes back. So I guess I will just close by saying that it is a very busy time to be an environmental lawyer in Tennessee. There is a lot going on. But I really think that we are at a pivotal period in our state of choosing how we grow. We are going to grow, the question is how. And so at SCLC, we are really committed to the idea that we should grow in a way that respects our incredible natural resources and the incredible biodiversity that we're gifted with. And, so many people are moving to our state because of how beautiful it is. And so we want to preserve our natural landscape so that they can continue to be enjoyed by Tennesseans for generations to come. So I will end there, and thank you for having me.
So going back to this decade, can you give an example about how they would compromise the water? Like, were they like stopping trout on their land? Like, what was the issue?
They were filling in their wetlands. They wanted to, I think, build a house on their land. And so, yeah, they were kind of paving over their wetlands without having a federal permit. And when you get a federal permit, oftentimes you can fill in wetlands, but you have to buy mitigation credits and things like that. And they just were doing it without a federal permit. Yep.
And around Nashville and throughout the state, many agricultural lands are being converted to houses. I drove out to Spring Hill and I got to last for 5 years and I literally had over a while. And my question is, a lot of, Tennessee's a farming state, mostly for agriculture, which means it's mostly what I call spray farms. I don't like to say conventional agriculture. Spray farms. So I'm often wondering what the trade-off environmentally is going from spray commodity agriculture to residential. A lot of people assume it's much worse. Losing productive ag land is a whole nother issue. But do you have any insight in that?
I would say that the part of that we focused on recently is the flooding impacts. When you have ag land that can soak up rainwater, we're seeing a lot of times farmland will be bought up and converted into a subdivision, and then the next time it rains, the neighboring farmer is like, where did all this water come from? And it's because they're getting both their lot and the lot next to them. And so yeah, that's one of the large impacts that we've really noticed is just it's hardening our landscape. And when it's concentrated in really dense pockets like Spring Hill, that can have some major implications for our roadways and stuff.
Is anyone monitoring what it's doing to the larger systems? Because groundwater is now up.
Right.
And I've often wondered if we're starting to see environmental water quality will cause a huge conversion.
Mm,
Or if, you know, agriculture was called.
Right.
Whether or not that may be lessened or better water quality. You know, what I mean, so here,
yeah, I don't know if anybody is really focused on that issue in particular. It'd be a really interesting, you know, Vanderbilt doctoral research project or something. We do have what's called a 303D list. Every state is required to create such a list, and you know, it shows our impaired watersheds. And so I think we've got a much larger, you can see trends over time of how many of our state waters are on the 303D list, and why. Is it for sedimentation? Is it for you know, thermal pollution? Like these could all be indicative of hardening of our landscapes. Right, right. But I don't know that anybody's doing specific research on that.
So, I think public notice of the public constituents, because thank God you guys in the nonprofits that let us know, and that's the only way I usually find out. It concerns me that that's not made actually public in a way that most people can access, because those of us sitting here, we might know about this, but most people never hear about it. If they did, they would probably be wondering, how is that possible? That's a state or federal level, that's the possibility, these decisions are being made about.
So, you know, for the proposed rule changes, there are listservs that you can sign up for TWIG. They will promulgate their proposed changes via listserv. And they also have a really great webpage. It's called the Data Viewer, where they have proposed rule changes and kind of the trove of documents for each permit that is issued in the state for water permits. And so those are two sources that I use a lot in my practice. And I think they also just publish it on their website. So you just have to look on the website. And so I have heard TWIG say multiple times that they're always looking for ways to get their information out to the public in different forums, but you do need to have a certain level of buy-in to sign up for the listservs and to monitor the data viewer and the website and things like that. So yeah, I think everybody would agree that it's an imperfect system, but there are multiple ways that you can try to access this information.
they have to.
Right.
You know, depending on everybody who does access that information, to make sure that it's
Spreading the word. Yeah.
Or we need that. Or, you know, it's really hard. So, yeah, everyone, right, it's in the Tennessee, and you can do that. Isn't that about the friend of a lot of car on the outside, and now CBA is really going to the southern side of that. Are you all looking, trying to?
Oh, yes.
I'm so thankful.
Yeah, I only had half an hour, but yeah, we are heavily involved in TV's proposed gas build out. Yeah, and it could be, you should have Amanda Garcia back and talk about that. She's the head of our energy work in our Tennessee office, and is we're very busy with it, so there's a lot to say. Yeah, yeah.
Curious about any work touches on gas.
Yeah.
EPA has been getting aggressive on gas, but what's that?
Yeah, so we do a lot of PFAS work. We've particularly been focused on it in our North Carolina and Georgia offices. Tennessee right now, and TWIG is in the process of gathering data from our our drinking water intakes and like our drinking water plants, because you know, they were starting to do this a couple of years ago. They have just started publishing data this past fall. Now they're going to be federally required to do this. But we just don't have a good handle in our state on how much PFAS we have in our rivers and streams. We have not done this testing before. Our permits don't require disclosure of PFAS. Our discharge permits don't. We've submitted comments letters to TWIG on certain industries that, you know, they are coded to where it's highly likely that they're discharging PFAS, and we've advocated that they at least require these companies to disclose PFAS. That hasn't happened yet. And so it's something that we're closely watching, and I think we're going to have a better idea you know, how we're gonna approach this moving forward once we actually get a better sense of, you know, do we have hot pockets of PFAS in certain rivers and streams in certain areas? Do we know of industry discharges that are happening upstream of those? Is it affecting drinking water sources for Tennesseans? We'll have a better idea as the data starts to come in.
Yeah. So TWIG has that available publicly as far as the agency on five or labeling. That data, we're gonna make that back. We have that available currently. They have also been doing, source water, so not the water, but the actual, testing of samples that go into, plants that they create. So that is also a law on that, for this and for that. So we know, and we're really trying to update it as things come out. Yeah, they did release their, that from six, they have a 6-inch scale for PFAS, that I'm explaining about. So you can get the website is constantly thinking of the process. We are considering, there has been a request on the wastewater testing, but we have not yet started that because we're still in the process of.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot going on, a lot of different places to be paying attention to. How do you decide like what issues to prioritize and what to focus on? Like, is there an equity lens that like, here's where we can make the focus impact, and how do you sort of think through those priorities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So SCLC has kind of like a 10-year plan process that we do every 10 years. And we just got through, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago with our latest iteration, and kind of the twin pillars that we're always looking at proposed new cases through the context of is climate change and environmental justice. So again, I can only fill up my time with so many cases, but we do a lot of work with Memphis communities, Memphis Community Against Pollution. We fought off the Byhalia pipeline a couple of years with them that was going to put a crude oil pipeline through a predominantly Black neighborhood in Southwest Memphis. We just had a big win with them where an ethylene oxide facility was operating in a predominantly Black neighborhoods community. That's a huge carcinogenic, causes cancer. What's the term I'm looking for? That facility just shut down based on our advocacy with MCAP, which was, you know, a great win too. So we do try to focus our work on what will have the biggest impact in our state. Will this be like a precedent setting case that could have, you know, ripple effects throughout our state? And then what can we do to advocate for historically disadvantaged communities in our state? So those are kind of the two lenses that we're always trying to work through.
Has there been an increase in reversal of like protections and all that lately from community? Like, have you noticed there's an uptick, or is it kind of for the bar, which put down fires?
I think that I have a lot of respect for the situation that TWIG often finds itself in, of, you know, being responsive to environmental communities, and also a legislator that is oftentimes very antagonistic towards environmental protections and really wants growth at all costs. So I think that environmental groups have a really valuable role to play in making sure that the environmental concerns and repercussions are front and center in front of TWIG, as well as voices of individual legislators. So I think that, you know, I've only been in this job for 3 years. It's hard for me to tell long-term trends. But there have been obviously examples of TWIG proposing changes that we just are really concerned about from a water quality perspective, and feel like we need to step in and push back on. Yeah. I mean, as I said, ag is our largest source of water pollution in our state, but it's a very tough nut to crack because ag runoff is not you know, you don't have to get a permit for it under the Clean Water Act, nor do you have to under state law. And so we also don't really have good data. We don't collect data on ag contamination of water. So, you know, I think getting an understanding of the problem is the first step before anything else, and that's something that we still need to work on. So we don't do a lot of work, the national office with Tennessee's Department of Ag, but it's something that we're definitely concerned about, and if anybody has any suggestions, we're all ears.
Time for one more question.
Oh, gosh. I don't know. Do I read through all these? Oh, yeah. Let me see.
You would show the population slide, and with population, we're making, well, this is chicken and the egg. Tennessee has also attracted a lot of very large industry. And it seems to be, it's because we have 21 acres and a lot of water. The industry requires a lot of water. So it's one like farmlands. So have you been involved in that piece of looking at how business funding Tennessee has become?
Yeah, yes, we have. We are doing a lot of work on the Duck River watershed. And that is a relatively small river. It's much smaller than the Cumberland or the Tennessee, but it is services. The watershed is 12 counties that are basically south of Nashville, the area that our state is experiencing the highest amount of growth. And there has been a process by which TWIG is dramatically increasing the amount of water that local water utilities are allowed to withdraw from the Duck. The Duck also happens to be the most biodiverse river in our nation, and a top 3 most biodiverse rivers in the entire world. And it is a jewel on a world scale. And it is chock full of endangered species. And so we are following that closely. We're involved in litigation on that right now to make sure that the amount of water that we are allowing to be withdrawn from this small river doesn't affect the biological diversity of that river, and that we are putting in place sufficient protections to protect the river during periods of low flow and drought. So that is another big topic that I'm working on. But part of the reason that these utilities are requesting so much water is that they're getting a lot of new battery plants a new battery plant is coming into Columbia that is going to take several million gallons a day of water from the Duck. So I think that, you know, it goes to the larger question of, you know, we're attracting growth, where do we place it? Like, should we be placing that next to the Tennessee as opposed to the Duck River? You know, questions like that are ones that I think our state's just going to have to grapple with in the next several years.